Good afternoon, sixth grade students. I'm back with Granted, which is becoming one of my new favorite books. We left Ophelia at the edge of a pond with geese at the opposite end of the pond. And she's thinking about what she's heard before about geese and how they could be a little bit dangerous to fairies. So we are beginning on page 97. I hope those of you who have the book in your hands, I hope you're following along. If not, get it out of your bag. We're in the middle of the page at the paragraph that begins, "They were definitely geese." Page 97. They were definitely geese, at least if the pictures she'd studied in zoology were any indication. Ophelia tried to remember everything she'd read about them. Approach slowly. Don't be loud. Try calling them by their first name, except she didn't know any of their first names. There were at least a dozen of them, nuzzling the grass, scrounging about for something to eat. Bugs, probably. Disgusting. Ophelia straightened herself up and advanced on foot, afraid the beating of her wings might startle them. All she wanted was a little conversation. Fairies were nature's most ephemeral creatures, but they were still bound to the woods and fields and to every living thing, big and small. The best of Ophelia's kind, the whisperers, could talk a blade of grass into bending or a flower into budding, could even convince a tree to blossom early. There were very few things, plant or animal, that a fairy couldn't commune with. And even with those exceptions, it was hardly the fairy's fault that communication broke down. Woodpeckers, for example, were notoriously hard to talk to, and howler monkeys. Cats, for the most part, just ignored everything you said. There were probably a dozen others, but most animals were open to talking to a fairy. Most. Ophelia approached cautiously, but it was no use. The first goose to spot her started honking instantly. Honk, honk. Ophelia understood his words. Our lake, trespasser, trespasser, go away. The other geese started to honk as well, creating a chorus of hooting and hollering. Trespasser, they cried, trespasser. And now they're speaking in French, and I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce this, so let's try. Swadicci, vous n'avez pas la bienvenue. Get out of here. Canadian geese, Ophelia thought to herself. Figures. She slowed her approach, wondering what they made of her, this bizarre creature with a human form and folded insect wings and strange coverings from head to toe, if they'd ever seen one of her kind. She hoped they found her too big to eat. She thought of Charlie and his arm. Though these beasts were all larger than she was, they also looked fat and uncoordinated. They'd never be able to catch her. Still, Ophelia thought it best to bow before she spoke. So they're speaking in French because they're Canadian geese, and French is the language of Canada. So that explains why they're speaking in French, I guess. Greetings, feathered ones. My name is Ophelia Delphinium Fidgets, Special Agent Fidgets, daughter of the Fae and granter of wishes, she began, using her full title, hoping it impressed. What's your name? She was nearly nose to beak with the first goose now, the one who'd started the ruckus. He straightened himself up to his full height, stretching out his neck so that he was twice as tall as her. I am Olivier. I'm Olivier. I can't really see. Is it Oliver? Maybe it's Oliver. Olivier. I think he has a French name. Let's just call him Oliver. I am Oliver, and you, he said haughtily, are an intruder. This is our territory. We have claimed it in the name of our gaggle, and we request that you vacate the premises immediately. Immediate. We're going to have a lot of French words in this, so I think I need to learn French. Let's go with immédiatement. Immediatamente. Ophelia rolled her eyes. Some animals could be so pompous. This wasn't going to be easy. Oliver, she said, straining to keep her tone polite, That's a noble sounding name for a noble looking bird. And that's a handsome bit of plumage you've got. She pointed at the goose's backside, a tuft of white feathers poking out in every direction. It reminded her a little of Charlie. Her flattery was lost on the bird. Oliver puffed out his chest and bobbed his head up and down for a moment before he resumed his squawking. Maybe you didn't hear me, petite insecte. Must I honk louder? The head goose began to strut, giving his wings a shake. Perhaps I should buffet you once or twice about the head. I could crush you beneath my webbed feet, you know. Vous m'adorant navagus. I'd like to see you try, Fia thought. She glanced down at her belt. No point wasting any of Raleigh's precious spray on this foul-tempered waterfowl. One little poke from her knife and he'd fly away fast enough. But that wouldn't help her find out which way to go. She took a measured breath. Look, Oliver, I just need some directions and then I'll be out of your feathers. Can you tell me where I am? Oliver turned to the geese and honked. It wants to know where it is, brainless creature. C'est simple de pierres. The other geese honked heartily, laughing at her. Althea crossed her arms defiantly. Did this strutting peacock just call her stupid? A fairy who scored a perfect 100 on her grantor's entrance exam? My head is not full of rot, she shouted, putting a quick end to the gaggle's giggles. I just need to know if I'm anywhere near Kettering, Ohio. Surely she was in the right state at least. Hadn't she crossed a big winding river a way back? I mean, you migrate for heaven's sake. Surely you must know your way around. Oliver snorted at her, ruffling his wings. Of course I know my way around, you frilly little bug person. I know that there are ponds and there are lakes and there are trees and mountains and giant towers of glass and stone and there are stars in the sky and insignificant imbeciles like you who ask stupid questions. Now go away before I give the order to peck you to death. She might have taken offense or at least been more on her guard, but Fia's intention had snagged on something Oliver said. Towers of glass and stone, buildings, big ones. High rises, a city. It could be the one she was looking for. How far are to those towers? How far? We passed them only this morning. Oliver craned his neck behind him. That way. But such places are not suited for a muncherin such as yourself. You would be squashed like a cockroach. That's provided you even make it out of here alive, which I am starting to doubt. He honked his loudest honk, and the geese behind him followed his lead, creating another volley of unbearable bleating. They started to move forward en masse. It was clearly time to leave. Thank you for your help, Althea said begrudgingly, as the mob closed in, waddling and hissing and flapping, trying to surround her. Maybe they decided they would try to eat her after all. Althea unfolded her own gossamer wings, much more elegant than Oliver's, and the geese paused at the sight of them. The wings' rainbow pattern reflecting the sunlight, capturing almost like stained glass. It had been only a short rest, but she couldn't let that stop her. She lifted into the sky away from the pond and its gang of graceless geese, too lazy to pursue. Bon de barras, good riddance, she heard Oliver call after her, the rest of his brethren taking up the chant. This was the last time she'd ever bother asking directions from a goose, she decided. Althea gained some altitude, then pointed herself in the direction Oliver told her, toward the towers of glass and stone and what she hoped was the city she was looking for. Home to a fountain and a coin, and a girl without a bike. Let's continue on to chapter 17, page 103. I wish. Althea's ears perked. At first, she was just certain it was just her mind playing tricks, making up words to accompany the wind music that whistled in her ears. But the farther she flew, the clearer it became. A steadily building incantation. She had to concentrate in order to home in on it. But when she closed her eyes, she could almost see the thread of magic dangling in front of her, ready to be tugged, and she could hear young Cassara's voice. I wish, jerk face, purple. That was definitely her wish, which meant Althea wasn't lost at all. Thank you, Oliver. That ill-mannered goose had actually pointed her in the right direction. Of course, it had taken her longer than 3 talks to get here, she guessed. But what mattered is that she'd found her way. Ophelia shrouded herself in clouds, low enough to avoid any more brushes with giant killer metal flying machines, but high enough to avoid the swarms of birds that seemed to wander aimlessly from rooftop to rooftop on the houses below. Because there were houses now, hundreds of them, she had come upon the outskirts of a city, with its maze-like neighborhoods stretching beneath her, patches of fenced-in green and roads like gray caterpillars branching between them. She took note of the metal boxes crawling along, looking like brightly painted steel tortoises. Automobiles. Probably just as dangerous as airplanes if you got caught with one behind you, except she didn't plan to be on the ground that long. Just long enough to snag a coin, release the contents of the vial around her neck, and seal the deal. Then she could get back to the haven, back to rolling mountains and crisp-scented Fraser firs, back to her little cottage and the stack of wool blankets she kept carefully folded by her bed to snuggle under. This was a different world than she was used to. Amid the treetops of home, there was a perpetual thrum, the rustle of leaves, the buzzing of insects, the sounds of nature like the heartbeat of the world, but it was still peaceful in its way. The city she approached was much louder, grittier, cars everywhere, lights flashing, a cacophony of mechanical noises, beeping, grinding, growling. The thunder of machines building and breaking and rebuilding, crowded parking lots and flashes of neon, the giant signs posted every 50 feet along the side of the road, the brown bins overflowing with waste, the long stretches of asphalt and metal and plastic punctuated only occasionally by a lonely tree or a straggling line of bushes. These overcrowded monoliths of brick and steel, all signs of an advanced civilization. Something to be proud of, but it only reinforced what Ophelia already knew. This world was no place for fairies. Not anymore. And yet, there were pockets of beauty in between the buildings and the billboards. As she flew, Ophelia picked up the high trill of children's laughter. She watched as 2 smiling men walked hand in hand in a park. She saw a woman with a can dutifully watering her pots full of flowers, perhaps one of them nursing a fairy that would be found someday. There was happiness. There was wonder. There was a wish. She let the whisper guide her, followed it the way a bat follows its own bouncing voice, over the housetops and the flower beds that reminded her of her own founding. It had been in the backyard of a house very much like the ones below her that Ophelia was born, barely the size of a date, curled up on that delphinium bud, eager to stretch her limbs and take her first real breath. Paolo told her he'd had to dodge a curious squirrel and fend off a pollen-hungry worker bee to get to her. But such was the way of things. Nothing beautiful was easy to come by. I wish, up over a row of bigger houses with bigger fences, along a road clogged with even more automobiles, occasionally honking like temperamental geese, past towers with blinking lights as if giant fireflies had lit upon them, and something else, a white glow like a distant star. She recognized it the moment she saw it. Kasara's coin, guiding her, beckoning to her from the bottom of a fountain, glittering with the promise of magic to be, right where the dark gray of the parking lot merged with the sun-bleached stone walkway, the entrance of the town center mall. Ophelia slowed the beating of her wings, hovering a full tree's length above it. There were bushes on the outskirts and grass that looked almost too green to be real. Rows of flowers lined the path leading to the front doors, bright white lilies, and Ophelia noted with a smile bright pink azaleas, the same color as her suit. There were also people, not many, but enough to be worrisome. walking quickly along the path past the fountain leading in and out of the mall. No one sat on the stone benches or stood idly by the entrance, but the fairly steady stream of bodies coming in and out could prove problematic. Somebody would surely see Ophelia smuggling a nickel out of the fountain's pool. They wouldn't see a fairy, of course. They would see a bluebird or a chickadee or whatever else the camera triggered in their easily distracted brains. But even that was a risk. If she were a human and saw a bird diving into the water after nickel, she'd be curious. She'd keep watching. She might even try to get a picture of it. And that would be a catastrophe. She couldn't just barge right in and take what she wanted, as much as the burning white glow of Kasara's wish demanded it. This would require stealth and cunning. Luckily, next to flying, fidgeting, and giving Charlie Whistler a hard time, stealth and cunning were the things Ophelia was best at. She eyed the bushes closest to the fountain. They were thick boxwood shrubs, perfect cover for a fairy on a covert op. Ophelia put her hand to her beating heart one last time, just to make sure the magic was still safely contained. Then, to herself, because there was no one else to listen, she whispered, "This is Agent Fidgets in position. Target acquired. I'm going in." We're going to stop right there on page 107, and we'll start tomorrow, chapter 18, page 108. Thanks so much, 6th grade students. Have a really great afternoon and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.